I'm Robin Vincent and welcome back to Molten Modular. This is just a quick video to have a look at installing the power supply into the case. Here is the case. This is the Moog 104 HP case that I've opted for. Look at that word on the back. There is something about having that which I find awesome. But by the by, it's a well-made, feels pretty rugged and metal case. It has sliding nuts. Is that important? Who knows? It has no other holes or anything in the case at all for anything to come out of. So there's no sneaky getting around the back or routing any cables in and out that way. No, the power supply has to be external using a module like this. This is the 4MS Row Power 40. Now, when I originally made my video about cases, I talked about the tip-top Micro Zeus power supply, which I was going to use, but then through various bits of advice and other people talking to, they just pushed me up to the 4MS one. They suggested that it was more stable, that it ran cooler, not quite so hot, and probably the best feature is this extra socket here. This is useful because you can daisy chain to another power module in another row. So if you want to add a second row to your system, you don't need to have a whole nother individual power supply going to the wall. You can use the same power brick going into the one 4MS module, which can then daisy chain with a little cable to your next row, and so on. And that's extraordinarily useful if, like me, you're hoping to expand to another row at some point. I've gone for the 40 rather than the 30, the slightly less powerful one, really because this is the only one that Red Dog had in stock. The 30 would be plenty for this size of rack, but the 40 is a bit more than I need, but that's fine. They're always saying that you need a bigger power supply. So if we look on the back, we can see where the flying bus cables plug in to these little sockets here, and this is a flying bus cable. Now it has a red line on it, which is very important. That has to go in the right orientation, and with the 4MS this means it has to be pointing down. Thankfully, the flying bus cables also have this little knob on the top here, and this has a corresponding sort of gap here on the socket, so I can never put them in the wrong way around. But it's worth always checking which way round things have to go and where the red line needs to be towards. And with these, it needs to be towards the bottom. So I can plug that in there. And there's two for lots of modules, and I can plug that one in alongside. The red line is at the bottom, which is where it needs to be. Now if I lay these out, I can see I've got my sockets the right way round on that one, and the sockets completely upside down on that one. So what I'll do is I'm going to take that out, turn it around, plug in the other end. Crisis averted. Now they recommend that you do a little sort of cable folding exercise to get it to run in sort of two rows. Like that. Which is very neat. Now in all the modular grid sort of mock-ups I've done of this unit, I've always put the power supply over here. However, the orientation of these cables, the way that they sort of would bend and push up against that side, just means that this really needs to go over here. It's ruined the entire look of my proposed rack, but I'm just going to have to cope with it and get the hang of it. And that's all right. So what I need to do is screw it into some of these here flying nut things. So being the overly enthusiastic person that I am, I bought some of these Befacto knurlies, which are kind of posh Eurorack screws, because I don't want to, put any nasty screw marks on any of my modules. I want to keep it as neat and lovely as possible. And these little fellas with the washers can really help with that. And I'm going to be taking modules in and out quite a bit, so I figured that that might be a good thing. So let's see if I can get this to work. So I only need one of those. One of those. Screw that one in. Now this is genuinely the first time I have ever put a module into a Eurorack case. It's quite exciting, even though it's only the power supply. It is that simple. I can do that slightly, move it right down this end, tighten it up. And there she is. Look at that. This is now ready for a whole bunch of modules. Now the 4MS doesn't come with a wall wart or power brick to supply the actual power, and this is one of the areas of confusion that I found when I was researching power supplies as to what you actually plug into these things. But it turns out that the 4MS takes more or less a sort of a universal laptop supply, and I've got dozens of those knocking around. According to the manual here, just provided that it's 15 volts to 20 volts DC and has a minimum of 30 watts output. That's pretty much all you need. So I have one here called PowerCool Universal AC Adapter, running at 65 watts, and it has an output of 15 volts to 20 volts. So I'm going to give that a go. Ta-da. Right, this sticking in here. With a bit of luck, when I flick the switch, I won't electrocute myself. There you go, that's nice. I've got a light on plus 5 volts and plus 12 volts and minus 12 volts. I think that's a go. So there you are, my Moog case, power supply, plugged in, flying bus cables, all ready for modules. Awesome. Now the other thing I was going to do was to incorporate it with my Mother 32. Now, normally speaking, you would take this out of its case and drop it into here, but I don't want it to take up that much room. So my plan is at some point to get 2 rows, which will then incorporate the Mother 32. But until that point, I want them to be used together. And perhaps rather than having them as 2 separate units, I'm going to use the 2-tier brackets that you can get for the Moog and put it a bit like that. Would that work? What do you think? Or maybe the other way. No, I can't do it this way around because there'd be no side on that and it'll just like fall down. So some kind of plan to stick it like that has got to be interesting. Let's try it anyway. Okay, let's try it. So I have my brackets. Okay. So essentially what you do is use these washers to mount it on the side of the case like so. And there you have a rather nice, a rather natty little angle. Into which that fits flipping perfectly. So there you have it, my special sort of custom 1.5 tier Moog rack. And I have a little bit of room over here for some extras and the zero coast right down here. Now this isn't completely rigid yet, that's because I'm waiting for a particular piece to come in from Moog, which is the 104 HP equivalent of this, which is just a little brace that goes at the back, because when you put the 2 tiers on the 60 HP, then this goes at the back in order to keep it that little bit rigid so it doesn't do this little bit of moving at the back. I need a longer one of those, and that's on its way to me at some point, I believe, which should sort that out a little bit. But as it is, it's still pretty good. So I'm ready to go. I'm ready to stick in my first proper modules, and my next video is all about that, choosing that first 104 HP of modules, those first modules to take that step into Eurorack. What are you going to buy? What are you going to get? How do you do that? How do you break down these hundreds and hundreds of available, awesome, wonderful modules? How do you break it down into just a single skiff like this? Well, I tell you, it's one of the hardest things, one of the hardest processes I've ever been through, and I'm right in the middle of writing all that up. And I'll be making a video on it very shortly. So check that out. And in the meantime, go and make some tunes.